All right, thank you for joining us. Today is Wednesday, September the 9th, and we're continuing our discussion with amazing artists and art educators. Today we will be speaking with Ann Johnson, who is a visual artist and arts educator at Prairie View A&M University. And those are not the only things that Ann does. And I'm really, really looking forward to hearing a lot about, some of the information that I don't know about her, even though I've known her for a while now. And I'm going to begin with you the same way that I've begun with the other um, interviewees in this series and ask you how you were introduced to the arts.
Okay. Growing up, my mother she was that girl, total green thumb, sewed everything. We would fly all the time. But she would also paint. And she would do ceramics. I mean, she was just totally artistic. And that's probably my biggest influence initially, other than watching JJ on Good Times, like everybody of this age group, and my brother drawing cartoons. But I remember specifically one time my mother was painting a piece for the church, and she painted a black Jesus, and they rejected it. They didn't want it. They said, "No, we don't want that." He was fly. He had a big afro, everything.
Real
But,
JJ Evans
we
moment.
don't. Yeah, the black church didn't want black Jesus in it.
Interesting.
So she repainted it to the Jesus we're used to seeing. Blonde hair, blue eyes, and to this day, that painting is still in that church. But she just kept moving. She didn't let it stress her, and I've just always been inspired by her artistically. And fortunately, a couple of years ago at the Community Artists Collective, she and I had a show together, and which was very fly. She's totally self-taught, and so it was great. She was coming for me too. She was like, "Are you ready? Because I have 9 paintings." So she was initially my influence, and then as I grew through school, because I didn't major in art, I majored in fashion. I was afraid to major in art. I didn't think I was good enough because I grew up in Wyoming, and anytime there was an art competition, I would, I'm drawing Tina Turner or Prince or somebody like that, and everybody else is painting cows. So I would never win anything. So I went to fashion school, then I came to Prairie View, and I realized, art is my true talent. And then I learned under Reverend Talley, Reverend Clarence Talley at Prairie View, who has been my mentor, and we work together to this day.
Wow. Okay. So when was it that you knew that your initial interest in the arts could be translated into a profession in the arts?
Um, Probably when I got to Prairie View, when I finished in fashion and I decided I was going to go to grad school for art, I was kind of watching Reverend Talley, and I'm like, it's kind of cool to be a college art professor. All your supplies are purchased for you. You don't have to be here all day. It was perfect.
That
So I
was
was like, this is kind of cool. I kind of like that. And so once I got acclimated, I taught fashion for 10 years before I migrated over to the art department. But I'm always an artist at heart. And probably around that time, I was like, you know what? I think I'm good enough to really focus on my visual arts career. I need to just step on out there. Something about those late 30s, you start making decisions with your life. And I'm like, I think I can go ahead and step on out there. And fortunately, being in Houston, everyone is so supportive. Like, Nate, I think you're talking to Nathaniel Banet. He's like my brother in art. We go to conferences together. When I was in graduate school and he was making that leap from graffiti artist D-Light to Nathaniel, because I knew him as D-Light first. He would come out to the house and I would just go through the garage, take whatever you want. We have that kind of community. So Houston is a great place to grow as an artist because to me, there's not a lot of static, but there's more support for each other. So, and then of course, working with the collective, Michelle Barnes, of course, is another mentor. And she opened my eyes to art education at not the level that I was teaching at, but for the younger ones, the little ones, and the importance of making sure in the hoods they have art and access to art education as well. So I learned all that training from her as well.
Well, I want to move forward and look at some of your work, but on the point, in October, we're going to be engaging in a panel discussion, part two of this initial interview series. And you mentioned that you are, or that you became familiar with the importance of exposing children to the arts, how significant that is. Our larger discussion is going to be about how arts and arts education are social justice issues. In your work with young children, have you found that to be true? You know, not just because we're existing right now in a state of civil unrest and so much emphasis has been focused on what's going on in terms of social justice, literally, obviously.
Yeah.
You know, what kind of connections have you made between arts and social justice?
Well, with the little kids, because I was teaching them in the summer, it's all you could do to get them to sit down for 10 minutes, you know? So that's a little different, but I would try to do, I did a project one time, I'll never forget it, where it was one of those days, it was probably storming in Houston. I worked in Acres Home for years at Lincoln Community Center, Lincoln Park. And I had a Lorna Simpson book in the car. And I said, you know what, today we're gonna do photography. I had one of those little printers they used to have that you could hook up to your digital camera. And I said, I'm gonna have these kids restage some of her pictures. You know, they were from the back and the side angles. And it was always the little girls that would say, I don't wanna do it, I'm ugly. You know, and that would just break my heart that they would feel that way about themselves. And they didn't understand their beauty as young Black girls, you know? And so we kind of nurture and talk to them about it. And, you know, by the end of that class, they were feeling like, yes, I am a pretty girl, you know? So those were some of the challenges. And it was another way of exposing art to them that, you know, for them, it was arts and crafts, glitter and glue. But when you add another layer to it, even at a young age, you know, they could embrace it. Now, in terms of Prairie View, what I do is totally different because they're supposed to be woke. You know, these are college students. And a couple of years ago, I was worried about our future because I was like, really, you're not paying attention? I remember the day everybody wore hoods after the Trayvon Martin verdict. And there was like 2 students in the class and myself with the hood on. I'm like, what are y'all doing? You're wearing t-shirts that say woke, but you're sleepwalking. What are you doing? And so this last summer, I guess because COVID has them in the house, paying attention. I had several students that protested. So I've noticed, because I teach African-American art history and I offer them a lot of projects, they were all in, and how much more woke they are or how much more invested they are in actually seeing what's in front of them, as opposed to just kind of sleeping, you know, that digital thing, being disconnected. So I can see the difference in what they write and the works that they produce now. It's much more, I don't know even the word, but it's much more active and engaging.
Interesting. Okay, so on that note of active and engaging work, let's look at some of your pieces. I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
Uh-oh, I think I'm sharing too much. Let's see. Oh, there they are. Okay.
I say, don't get them bank statements on there.
No, nothing like that. Let me make sure that I'm not. Okay. There we go. So come on and talk to. I'm just gonna, you know, let you lead in
Okay.
and talk to us about what these.
That is my mother and her sister. That's my aunt. She's about to be 90. They both still look like that. My mother's just turned 83 last week. So I did an exhibition at Women in Their Work in Austin in 2016. It's a fascinating year because it was an election year. And this exhibition was called Converse Real Talk. And it was really inspired when I wrote the proposal by, you know, when President Obama became president, all the little nasty emails and people hiding behind their screens, totally different from now. Nobody's hiding anymore. But then people would, you know, say all these nasty comments. And I was like, well, why don't you just sit face to face? I dare you, I challenge you to have that conversation with someone face to face. So in the gallery space, I created these white trees and white chairs so that the people are the color of the composition, and you have to sit face to face and actually have a real conversation with someone. And there would be like certain words on the tree, like immigration or Obama or Trump. I was ahead of my time. Trump, you know, just certain trigger words that would lead a conversation. And people would actually, they extended the exhibition for 3 months, and people would actually come on their lunch break and sit and converse. The images on the trees, I'm an experimental printmaker, so I print on anything but paper, are actual leaves, and they're black faces. And that was intentional because I wanted the audience to know that someone is always listening. If you're talking about someone or to someone or around someone, someone is always listening. So no matter who sat in those 2 trees, the images on the leaves were peering into the conversation.
Mm-hmm. I love this idea. Um, what's different about this, I think, is your prompting, right? I mean, I've seen performance art where,
Mhm.
what's her name, Abramovich, something, you know,
Uh-huh.
where she's the focus, right? She is the focus, and to have other people become the work and to frame the is really, really.
I was nowhere to be seen. I didn't want to be around.
Mhm.
In fact, there was, the way the gallery was set up, there was like 4 different tree spaces. And one of those tree spaces, there was a camera peering down from the ceiling, like a nanny cam. Then if you sat at a different tree, you could watch that conversation on TV. So again, it was, you never know who's watching. So yeah, it was a pretty powerful space, and it wasn't an intimidating thing to do. It's just, let's sit down and talk. Let's
Even
let's
looking
let's
at
do that again.
Yeah, even looking at this image of our elders, you know, and the idea of the opportunity to have intergenerational conversation or be able to ear hustle a little bit, you
Right,
know,
right.
is really, really beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you.
So talk a little bit about these images that are on the leaves, because I know that you do a lot of printing, and to have this kind of printing on that material is really.
They're all people that I know. A lot of them from, if you've been, when Awakenings movement used to be in the studios, and I call it the Church for Creative Misfits. It was not hard to just say, after church, I'm gonna have a photo shoot, you know. And so that's where several of those images come from. And I just let them, all I told them to do was look down at the camera, and whatever expression you have is what I'm gonna roll with. The image on the bottom was one of my students, and he was just kind of going like this, you know, and it worked. You know, it's one of the more powerful leaves, because this very exhibition and those, it can still be shown today. You know, I showed it in San Antonio earlier this year. It's been to Syracuse, um, Galveston. It's been several places. It's traveled. And sometimes it's just 1 tree and 2 chairs, but the engagement, once people realize I can actually sit in those chairs, those conversations are amazing.
It's beautiful. Very, very beautiful.
Thank you. That's a longer shot of the space in Galveston. I'm sorry, in Austin. And in the corner, you'll see that white mailbox. So if you sat at, yeah, right there. If you sat at that particular bench, it was just 1 bench, and on the side of it was a basket with pencil and paper, and you could just write whatever and put it in that mailbox. And some of them I didn't even read. I have them, you know, in a box. And there were some mirrors, and it was called the reflection tree. And people could sit there and just, one of them, this lady wrote like a 10-page letter about her experience with police brutality, which was very interesting. And then on the bottom, those are some of the leaves that were on the trees. And in that, if you see that park bench, right above that park bench in the corner, that was the TV monitor from the other side of the gallery.
Isn't that nice?
So it was a very well received exhibition.
I love it because, you know, for so many reasons. It's graceful, it's beautiful, provides time for exchange, for voyeurism, but also for listening. And to me, that is really poignant. That's something that doesn't happen a lot of times in conversation.
Right.
Very, very, very beautiful.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Okay, so harvest exhibition.
Okay. So this was at Houston Museum of African American Art last year. I worked with Kaneem Smith,
Mhm.
one of the coldest artists ever. I just love her work. And so that was a challenge in itself. Last summer I was able to not teach my summer camp. So I was able to focus just on creating work. And I actually met one of my sheroes, Allison Sarr, and saw her exhibit. I know I totally fanned out. She looks just like your mother, by the way. So I totally fanned out, and I touched her hand, and I hadn't been the same since. Her exhibition blew me away because it was a printmaking exhibition, but her sculptures were there, and I didn't expect that. And her infusion of cotton into her sculptures just blew me away. So I started thinking about, man, you know, I can't do anything with Kaneem because this is Kaneem. I would tell people I'm gonna have an exhibition with Kaneem, and they're like, oh. So I said, well, let me try to print on cotton and see if I can actually print on cotton. And it's trial and error, but I was successful. I was able to do it. And so this exhibition, it focused on slavery, but some of the images that I used were contemporary because I wanted to show that connection, you know. I wanted to appreciate, the kids are saying now I'm not my ancestors. Well, you are. You just doing things in a different way. And so what we actually ended up doing, and that was Dominic's idea, I wanted to create a plantation. I didn't know how. And Dominic came up with this concept of these raised rows of cotton. And those are actual cotton stalks from a plantation. You can actually order cotton from a plantation. It's very weird. And throughout the cotton bowls, you'll see images on faces recognizing, our people. Some were my relatives, some were not. Some were people I knew, some were not. And so it ended up being a very powerful exhibition. I also explored a genealogy, the history of gynecology in Black women,
Mhm.
which is something we don't talk about enough at
Absolutely.
all.
Mhm.
And so it was a pretty powerful exhibition.
This play between the tangibly soft material, but the conceptually tough kind
Yeah,
of that content is so hard hitting,
yeah,
undeniably so. Is really interesting. The walking down the rows,
yeah,
reconstructing that image of the plantation is,
yeah. It kind of took you somewhere, you
yeah,
know.
yeah, very successful.
Mhm. Thank you. And that was what I call my row of auction blocks. And so each image that's inside of the small glass case are contemporary images. One is my niece, my nephew, some people that I know, um, but they are on top of an auction block. So there's that connection between the now, the present, and the past, right? Just the word alone. One of them says quadroon, um, runaway, Negro, soul. You have those strong words on the bottom, runaway, but then on the block, like that second one says Negro, but under her it says coon.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those derogatory names, we can never forget, where we've come from and who broke their backs for us. But, I want to really have that connection between these contemporary images and the brutal past.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
it,
these images are painted or printed on paper that you have created
no, they're printed directly on cotton.
on cotton.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're printed on cotton. Yeah, it's the intaglio method that I use for printmaking. Just like the leaves are printed directly on the leaves.
Right, right.
Sycamore leaves and magnolia leaves are like velvet on the back. Cotton was a lot of trial and error. I didn't throw anything away, but I have a whole bunch of cotton like this from unsuccessful prints. So once I figured it out and I was able to save it and get it in a frame, it kind of blew me away the way that it turned out. And just that whole relationship between Black folks and cotton, the past with a contemporary image, all of that tells a story. And the fact that it's exhibited this way as a row, as a row of blocks. Who's next on the auction block?
Yeah, yeah. I love the juxtaposition of images and words. I've always loved that. And just, is it, I'm blown away actually, because I haven't seen this newer work. And I know we're
Oh,
talking
I thought you saw the show.
I know, definitely. But it's just so beautiful because so much goes understood, but in someone might be unable, as I am apparently right now, unable to articulate the relationship between the people and the product. And to create a process that bridges that gap is so smart.
What I tell my students, you may walk out of here claiming you hate art. You don't. If you're a sneakerhead, you don't hate art. But anyway, if you learn anything from my class, if it's painting, drawing, art history, whatever, just please learn to don't just look at a work of art, but look into it. You don't have to like it, but don't just look at it, look into it. When you start to look into it, something is going to be revealed to you. And you get past for me, it's always, how did you do that? How did you do that? But once I tell you how, now look into it and see why I did that.
Beautiful. There's a.
And that's a close up. That's my niece, Constance. And this is probably the most popular out of all of the cotton prints. And I'm not one to look for likes or anything like that, but I posted it and it had like 1,000 likes. And I was like, oh, be still my heart, I don't usually look, it kind of scared me for a minute, but it was effective. It says winch right there in copper, that's embossed on the glass, because that's what she would have been called.
Right, right.
And then she looks so defiant in that image, it was appropriate to put her on a block that says wanted, because she would be the one to run away.
See, and this does draw that connection between Sims, James Marion Sims and gynecology that you alluded to. I mean, there's so many layers of meaning, and yeah. Amazing. Go back, sorry.
Whoops, there you go. So this one, I'm gonna move my Zoom box because I can't see it. There we go.
From the Say Her Name series.
This was the exhibition. I organized the exhibition at Art League Houston. It is called How Do I Say Her Name? And I wondered how many other female artists were struggling with this. How do we get this out? Myself, Delita Martin, Rabea Baid, we were at Tougaloo Art Colony in September of 2015. I will never forget this. And every day at the colony, we have like an artist luncheon lecture like you and I are doing now. And an artist would speak about their work. And good friend, artist from Memphis, Frank Robinson, he was talking and he looked at me and stopped. He said, Ann, what is going on at Prairie View? And I had no idea what he was talking about because I've been in Mississippi for 3 days. I had been disconnected. And then I started looking at our email and it says, don't respond if the press calls. I'm like, what is going on? It was a Sandra Bland stop. So I remember I was like, oh, wow, I thought it happened in Waller. I didn't realize it literally happened a block from campus.
Right.
And so I remember when we got back, the day I got back on a Saturday, and Sunday was the very first rally on campus. I'll never forget this. I was calling my coworkers and my sister. I'm going to Prairie View. If I'm not home in 2 hours, call somebody because something is not right. I was nervous. Been driving to Prairie View for 20 years. But that day I was a nervous wreck. My hands were shaking driving to Prairie View because it's just so unnerving knowing why she was stopped and where she was stopped. And I remember walking to the rally with Harrison Guy, like, isn't this a trip? Can you believe this is happening right here on our campus? And to this day, I have not been able to stop at the memorial that they have for her. I mean, it's no feeling like being afraid to go to work. And so I wondered how many other artists struggled, because the other part of this exhibition was we don't talk enough about the women. You know, we stop in traffic and doing all kinds of things. A lost life is a lost life. But sometimes the cause for the women, thank God, we're keeping Breonna's name alive. We have to keep her name alive. You know, she deserves justice. She was in her bed, you know. And so I wondered how many of my other fellow artists had these same emotions, and this group kind of felt the same way. I didn't know how to get it out. I didn't know how to get it out. And I didn't want it just to be about Sandra Bland. I wanted to recognize everybody. You know, I wanted to leave it open to the artists to address what they wanted to. So in the left corner is a piece that Rebea did, where she actually redid the Public Enemy logo, but that's her. So she put a woman there, and it's anamorphic. So depending on where you stand in the room, that shape is going to change, but she's still the target. And then on the TV monitor, this piece stopped me in my tracks, The Great Autumn Night. Autumn did this video, which now is in one of Solange's videos, but it started at this exhibition. And it's called I'll Call You When I Get Home. And it was just these words that, you know, Sandra Bland would have said to her mother, oh, I'm leaving Prairie View now. I'm gonna call you when I get home. And the first time we looked at it, Kaneem and I both just walked away. And it was just words, just words. Rosine Kouamad, she did something that was more reflective of what goes on in Africa with her quilt piece. And then I did a woke sign based on Robert Indiana's Love. I changed the words to woke. And then Monica Villarreal, she created that font, and she did that huge mural, and it was interactive. So she did a silhouette of Sandra Bland, but people could write their experiences or tributes on the wall. Extremely powerful. And then the other piece I did, you can barely see it in this image, is I did a glass quilt. And in that glass quilt, yeah, right there, I embossed each letter from her police transcript. It was 26 pages for a traffic stop. And so I embossed sections of the letter, literally each letter, and fused it on the glass. And if you got close to it, you could read what was going on. Now, she blessed that officer good before she went on the board. I mean, she cussed him out good. But you could read, you know, I'll light you up, just some of the stuff that happened. And that little box that's lit is actually a video that's screened onto that glass quilt of the route that she drove. So I drove to Prairie View one day, and I drove by that actual spot. I made the U-turn where she would have turned, and she was literally stopped 10 feet from a church.
Wow. Wow.
So it ended up being a really powerful exhibition. Kaneem's pieces were very abstract, but they were laces that reference suffrage of slavery, that whole textile thing we don't talk enough about in slavery. So it was a very powerful exhibit. And we ended up moving it to Texas A&M.
How long was it on exhibit there?
Texas A&M, it was on exhibit for a semester. Yeah, it was on for a semester.
Wonderful. I saw this exhibition online, and the details, I was actually trying to pull up some details of the image, because it is beautiful. It's haunting and really beautiful.
Well, I think it's important. I teach an artist activism lecture. I do it once or twice a year. And when I share with my students, I said, you need to know that art activism is more than just a mural. There's so many other ways to express. And in that piece, her image is not in that piece at all. There are some leaf prints of her hands, but you don't, unless you read it and start to read the story, you might not make that connection. But just the very words is what's happening now. You know, being pulled over for stupid stuff, you know, you get pulled over, you're about to have a heart attack. You just don't know what the outcome is going to be. So.
Deep.
So this one, 2015 was just, I didn't think it could get worse than 2015, but 2020 is winning this battle. It seemed like in 2015, every week, Philando Castile. Michael Brown was 2014. Um, the guys in Baton Rouge at the gas, I can't call his name right now, Sandra Bland. It was like, it seemed like every other week something was happening.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the first place I showed these were actually at the Collective. I had these mirrored sunglasses that law enforcement generally wears, and I did these transfer prints. So this is not a graphic, these are actual sunglasses.
Right.
And that is Michelle Thibault.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've ever seen, she's a Houston legend, you know, Houston neo soul artist who is very expressive when she sings. And she's been a muse for me for quite some time. And she was actually singing Peace Be Still in that still shot. And I used her image and an image of a student, and I called it It Just Keeps Happening. So it's an appearance of a mourning mother over her slain child. And to have that in sunglasses that law enforcement frequently wear, the title says everything. It just keeps happening.
Powerful. Something so small as you,
Right.
you know, have your students seen this piece? I mean,
I share it with them. I do share it with them. As I, Rebecca Bayin and I, you know, I'm in an art collective called Rude. Delita Martin, Lovey Olivia, Rebecca Bayin and myself. Rebecca and I usually do this lecture together. And when we did it last summer, I had a student, I said, there's no questions. We don't know what to say, you know, because they have not thought about art in that way. Mm-hmm.
right.
That is from the Texas A&M version of How Do I Say Her Name? And it's actually a moving clock. I think I sent you a slide where they are all moving. It was 3 clocks, and it's called Just Let Me Breathe, because I'm tired. I'm tired of these Beckys and Karens, and you know, why can't my little girl sell water on the street like anybody else without the cops being called on? How come I can't barbecue at this park like everybody else? Just leave me alone. You know, so that was literally the inspiration for this. So it's 3 red clocks with images of leaves, and they spin randomly. It's 1 feather and 2 leaves. And I just put all 3 of them on the wall and just let it rotate. I don't know if that will, oh, it should play for you. Yeah, and that's how that was exhibited. I kept that background kind of black. It's kind of somewhat futuristic.
They look like constellation. Like there's a constellation behind the.
Yeah, it was. I found these clocks, and I was able to kind of gut them a little bit and keep the second hand. And it had a little depth to it once I ripped off the paper of the actual clock face. And so it has a little depth to it. But all 3 of them kind of rotated at the same time at their own leisure. And so it's called Just Let Me Breathe. I just want to breathe. You know, that's a friend of mine, Rebecca, who just has that look, you know, like today is not the day.
And I am not the one on this day. The care that you take to preserve the quality of the leaf, right? I mean, this connection that I see between making sure that your point is made, yet leaving the nature or the effect of the leaf intact, right?
Right.
It says so much.
Right.
To the point.
I don't manipulate the leaves at all. I just, if I see a good leaf, I'm walking down the street, I keep a basket in the car. I have my spots where I get certain leaves from, but I just pick them up. And I love a leaf like that has enough space to print on, but it's tattered. Mm-hmm. So it shows that fragility of life and that fragility of nature.
Do you treat the leaves at all, just as for my own edification, do you treat the leaves at all so that you avoid their disintegrating, or, you know?
I don't treat them at all. I usually put them in a a shadow box. In
Mhm.
the case of Converse, I just have them in archival individual bags that I can slide in and out for the next exhibition. But unless somebody grabs them and crumbles them, which they shouldn't do, I've had I have leaves that I did from our first Rue exhibition in 2011, and nothing has changed with them. So I'm very specific with sycamore and magnolia because those leaves are basically like velvet on the back. So they absorb the ink. And that one is called Nesting. This was also at Art League Houston. This is at the time I didn't have much hope for the students because they were, you know, I guess we're analog and they're in the digital world and they had the headphones all day. They don't know how to look up. I can tell them, you know, from TSU how to get to the reggae hub. Oh no, it's okay. I'll find it on my phone. It's just down the street and around the corner. But you're like this. And so I created this series called Nesting because I felt like they were just nesting away. You know, they were not tuned in to what was happening around them. So I had these nests drop from the ceiling, and inside of each nest is an image printed on a feather. And those feathers, they're different types of positions. They look different ways. I had a student do a little photo shoot for me, and I just took the still shots. A couple of students, actually. That was the first time I had printed outside of my family. But I thought I needed to use students for this exhibition because that's what the initial conversation is about.
I love the idea of that you're asking your students to see in to work and that you are always seeing into, you know, your own environment, how your work is so expressive of all of the ways that you see people's humanity, different elements within, you know,
Thank you.
I can't wait to have this larger discussion in October because this is the opportunity that I think a lot of administrators, education administrators miss when they exclude art from the
Right.
okay? They prevent us from facilitating our students' development to see.
Yeah, and what I've realized is in my African American art history class, I mean, I don't have art majors in there, biology and chemistry, but because I incorporate projects, they want that outlet. They didn't realize they could do that, you know, or seeing art in a different way. Well, you mean photography is art? Yes, photography is art. You take pictures of yourself all day, you know.
Um,
So I've learned how to integrate that, and I've gotten some very interesting projects from the students.
oh, so here's the close up of
Oh yeah, there's a close up.
the
Yeah,
oh,
yeah. You could see the actual video. It had red lights, a red light and a blue light. I did on one side is a traditional quilt pattern, you know, your stars, like a North Star pattern. On the back side was actually a G's Bend pattern, which it was a very tedious project. I'll never do it again because, you know, I was impulsive and not realizing I was embossing each letter. And when you put that heat gun on that glass, it starts to pop. It sounds like you're getting shot. You know, it's very scary. And so it was probably the most tedious piece that I've ever created, but you can actually, you know, you can read quite clearly it's called the narrative of what happened. And then that video zooming in on that path on the street, which is now called Sandra Bland Drive, but it was called University Drive at the time. And you would just drive. I drove the exact route that she drove.
so where is this piece now?
And where is it?
Mhm.
In my garage.
You know, and
Yeah.
after hearing you talk about how much time you invested,
Yeah.
people who are not artists or who haven't engaged in the creative process might think, oh, this is, you know, a monument that's standing in some, but
Look, it's available. It's in my garage. My play brother chipped it. I'm like, you know what? It actually did go to Chicago. It was in a show in Chicago. And then it went from the Art League to Chicago and then back here. Yeah,
amazing.
thank you.
close up of the
Oh, and
woke.
that's the woke piece. Yeah. Just kind of a play on Robert Indiana, who I learned a lot about. I didn't realize he was such an activist. And based off of his love piece.
That in Philadelphia? Where is it? Where is
Yeah, yeah, the original love piece is in Philadelphia.
mm-hmm.
And then this is just based on it. And this one, I think that's the last one I sent you. This is very particular. Um, if anybody knows April Ryan, I want her to have it. This was inspired by April Ryan. At the very, I think it was the very first or second press conference in 2017 when that transition happened with the current occupant, because I don't call his name, but when Sean Spicer was the press secretary, and April Ryan asked him a question. April Ryan, the Urban Network reporter. And you know how you ask somebody a question and you kind of go like this? We've probably done that 3 or 4 times just in this talk. And she kind of went like that. And he looked at her and said, "Don't you shake your head at me?" And you know, every Black woman in America was like, "You ain't my daddy." But of course she didn't say that. You know, she was stunned that the press secretary was, you know, you don't shake your head at, you know, who are you to talk to somebody like that? So this image, I use this image frequently. It's a young slave girl. Her name is Clara. And when you find the actual image, underneath it will say, Clara holding her owner. You know, just take that in for a minute. Clara holding her owner. So when I put this piece, it's in this glass box, it says, "You can't see how you see me." Because for you to look at me and say, "Don't you shake your head at me," that's because you see me like you see Clara. That's all I am to you, is this girl and not a professional woman. And then of course, you know, the pennies speak for themselves. And so that's what this piece was about. You can't see how you see me. It was literally inspired by what happened to April Ryan that day.
Amazing. Amazing. All of these are so timely and,
Yeah.
you know, it just create a great foundation for, again, our larger discussion. You've always been someone who's been a forerunner, right? I mean, you've always thought ahead, as you alluded to when you were talking about mentioning Trump's name in the dialogue piece that you presented. You've always been such a forward thinker, and I'm so grateful to have gotten a look at some of your more recent work and to see the
I appreciate it.
career. Yeah, absolutely amazing. So, is there anything that you'd like to say about where you're going? I'm sorry, where you're going next, just in terms of your work or what you're thinking about?
Um, as artists, we're always churning. We never sleep because the mind is always churning. I very much consider myself an art activist now. And Breonna Taylor was eating at my soul and I didn't know what to do. I had to sit on it for a while, but I'm doing this series of candles of her, and I've worked with candles before. I'm trying to get the transfer process just right before I, attempt to show them anywhere. But I have some candles with her image on it that I'm lighting every day until someone is arrested. And to watch those candles deform and her image fade away, is something that's very powerful.
Yeah.
I've also been doing a series of iron boards with doing a transfer print process, showing that connection between that backbreaking work that was done for us to have the freedoms that we have now. And so I've been working on that. So I've been busy during this time, during quarantine. I've been very productive until school started. It's online teaching. Oh my Lord.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of letting it flow, I'm just letting the create.
Well, your students are certainly lucky to have you, and as is Prairie View A&M University, and we are so fortunate to have been able to spend some time with you today. Your work is
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the panel discussion.